Hey everyone, welcome to another Speed Secrets podcast. Today, my guest today is Brian Bohlander, who, Brian, I think you race in NASA road racing, but you also do some off-road stuff and all sorts of cool stuff, and you've been racing for a long time. We'll get into that. But Brian is also the director of sports marketing for a company that owns Peak Antifreeze. And, we're going to talk about driving because, well, duh, driving, right? But we're also going to talk about motorsport marketing or sponsorship. So welcome to the show, Brian. Thanks for agreeing to give all of the secrets so that everybody here listening will be able to have somebody else pay for all their racing. No pressure.
Yeah, no pressure at all. Thank you, Ross. I really appreciate the opportunity. We've talked about this for a couple of years now, going back to PRI. I think it was 2019. And, the timing couldn't be any better because so many things have changed in the marketplace over the past 9 months with COVID. So today's a perfect day to start having those conversations about where we are right now with motorsports marketing and where is hopefully going to go in the future here. Yeah. So again, thank you for the opportunity. Really, really excited to be here.
Well, in a minute, I'm going to ask you for your background, but you use motorsport marketing. That's a term that I kind of like to use, but the common term is sponsorship. Like everybody, some people I know say, "Oh, don't use that word sponsorship," because that's like that's what you give your little league baseball team. It's a gift. And motorsport marketing is something that's got value behind it. Do you care about it? Like, do you really care about those terms?
Well, I think in our industry, they're almost interchangeable, but from a real dictionary standpoint, what is sponsorship? Sponsorship is the act of asking for something without really expecting anything in return. What we're in the business with marketing, with motorsports, is trying to build businesses. And that is the key. And we'll talk more about that later. But a company isn't going to write you a check to go race unless there's something of value to them. So we almost should start using the term partnership, because in a lot of ways, what we do from a corporate standpoint to a racer standpoint is trying to build a mutually beneficial partnership where you incorporate some sales, where you incorporate marketing, and there's 1,000 other things you can incorporate it in as well. But at the end of the day, if you're asking a company for money, you've got to drive the needle for them and drive their business. And if you're not doing that, then this isn't going to last very long for you, and you're not going to advance very far in your career.
Yeah. It's the what's in it for me thing. Yeah.
Hey, and that's a challenge. And again, go ahead, Ross.
No, I was just going to say, can you give listeners a little of your background, both as a driver and how you got involved with motorsport, and then where you are professionally as a career, which I think some people might even be jealous of?
Well, I've been fortunate to be able to parlay a passion for motorsports since I was a child into a fulfilling career thus far. So just real high level, I mean, my background is pretty diverse. I grew up with a family of drag racers that when they had kids, they got out of the sport. Then going to midget races when I was younger, because my dad was in construction, my uncles were in construction, and one of the guys they worked with was one of the best midget racers around here. So that was really the starting point for me. Getting that, every weekend going to races and the passion of it. I got fortunate from pushing and prodding my dad enough that when I was 12, we started kart racing, and within 6 years started to chase the WK national circuit. At that point, I had to go off to college because I was 18 and had to make a decision what I wanted to do for a living. Do I want to continue to try and race, or do I want to figure out other ways to maybe make a living and go back at racing, that way? At 6'4", let's just say race cars aren't built for guys like us. I know there's been examples out there. There's some people that have been able to make it work, like Chris Neifel, for example, is my height, and some other guys, but we're the exception rather than the rule. So with that said, started off in the engineering world, figured out that wasn't for me. And through the passion of one of my great marketing professors early on, realized that, look, if you're going to make it in racing or even try and offset your hobby, you need to understand the marketing side of it, and pursued that degree, which ultimately turned into a corporate position where I am now, where for the past 20 years, I've been involved in sponsorship in some capacity on the Peak franchise and some of our other brands at Old World Industries as well.
And you drive.
And I drive.
Because we're here to talk about driving too. But so talk about your driving now.
Yeah, so we'll bypass now college and back into the real world. I had to take a little bit of a break for a while. Well, actually, step back for a second. I decided to go circle track racing for a couple of years because that was the time frame when everybody went to NASCAR because that's where the money was in the sport. And I realized real quick that that wasn't necessarily for me. Not saying I couldn't do it, just wasn't surrounded with the right people, and it just didn't go anywhere.
Yeah.
So got serious about the career, and actually got invited to go out to the Audubon Country Club one day with a project build that I had, and it didn't take but 2 laps on the racetrack to hook to put the hook back in and reel me back in to go road racing. And since 2007, have been involved with NASA for some capacity with NASA Great Lakes. Doing either HBDEs or club racing. We got the Thunder Roadster Series up and running, and through all that, had the passion of being an instructor. So been involved with Eric Meyer and his great program there, and ultimately led me to be the comp school director there. So since 2017, I've been NASA Great Lakes' comp school director. So kind of a broad background. Obviously, the karting background and road racing, it made sense for me to go back road racing. It's where my passion lies. It's where my expertise lies. And then last year, I got a unique opportunity to go out to the desert and race in the Mid 400. And, to me, it was just checking off the bucket list because it was really the first pro race. But we walked out of there raising money for a charity and going home with the trophy in class 5500. So I can't complain about that at all.
That's got to be cool. And I will admit that that's one of those things that I still need to do is I've thought about, Baja. I mean, who doesn't think about that kind of stuff, right? I mean, you want to go and drive in the dirt sometime.
Well, it's funny because you nicknamed me Rain Man when we met because we had a conversation about racing in the rain. And I want to bring that up because I think it's really important for you, Ross, and for your listeners. There's a lot of parallels to road racing and off-road racing. If you can imagine, so I'll take you through my experience at the Mint. If you can imagine, I was the first driver in the car, 3-hour stint. We started in the middle of the afternoon. By the time we got back to the end of the stint, it's dark. You have everything from trying to drive at night with dust and no visibility to consistently changing track conditions because more cars go through it. They rut it up and they tear it up. You have the whole passing element, which you have to strategically pass because if you run off in the wrong place, you cut a tire and take time off. So, I mean, a lot of the elements and things we learn road racing really, really play into effect. I had probably the best advice I was given was if you push the car to the point to where you physically hurt, you're hurting the race car. Just think of it from that perspective. So your job off-road racing is to push the car to that point to where it just about hurts and step back just a little bit. In my stint, I started third. I was leading by the end of the first lap. And I won't sit here and profess to you that I'm the greatest off-road racer ever. A lot of that was luck, but the part of the game is keeping the car rolling. Sometimes you have to sacrifice a little bit to get a little bit back more. Very similar to racing in the rain. It's a trade-off, right? Think about this. If you hit a rock rung and have to spend 20 minutes to take a tire and change a tire on the race car, you've thrown it away. You back it up just a little bit and you keep rolling and you get yourself through your stint. I will say that by far I was the weakest link on the team. So I was surrounded by great drivers. My job was to go bring the car home in one piece, not have any damage. And when I got out of the car, we were leading it and we had the same 4 tires on it that we started with. So I did everything I could do in my stint and the rest, they did the rest from there. And I got to say, that's key. We won this race because we had the same 4 tires on the car that we started the race with. It was fuel only, switch drivers out and navigators, and that was the deal. So, I mean, if anything, for your audience, again, there's a lot of endurance racers out there. The skill set is so similar. Ross, you do tremendous in this. You really would.
I mean, as you're talking there, going, how is this any different than whether it's a WRL or a Lemons or IMSA 24-hour race at Daytona? I mean, it's get the best co-drivers around you, get the best team around you, make the fewest mistakes, and you're going to get a good result. Yeah.
That's it in a nutshell. And the beauty of that race, it's just like an endurance race, like you mentioned, WRL or ARE or some of the other series. There's 2 things you win for a race like that. One of them is a medallion that when you actually finish the race, everybody goes over the stage or goes over the podium and they talk to the drivers that were in the car at that point. So that's the ultimate goal. If you walk home with the medallion that you finish the race, that alone speaks volumes. Anything else that happens after that is icing on the cake. And like I said, we were fortunate on our group that we were able to pull off the win. But just having the medallion alone to say, we were good enough that we survived almost 400 miles of this thing to take home a trophy. That's pretty neat.
So I got to ask you.
Yeah.
That was your first time.
First time.
and you come home with a trophy. The year that I won Daytona 24-hour race, the Rolex in the LMP2 class, I had two drivers that were co-driving with me, and it was their first Daytona. And we walked out of there with a Rolex watch, and I went, this is unfair. Like, I've waited 11 years and these guys walk in and they win their first time. Were there anybody that looking at you like, come on, guy, you need to pay your dues. You shouldn't have won this the first time out?
Well, no. Fortunately for me, no. And I have to say about the off-road community, they're so open to all of us that are in the motorsports community.
Yeah.
There's a lot of infighting in a lot of different groups, and I won't get into that. I want to keep it positive. But what I found really exciting about the off-road community is they embrace racers. Whether or not you're a road racer, or you've got another type of a discipline, they're happy to have another racer come try their form of motorsport. And that was the neatest thing to me. So I never felt that from that particular side, where I could see that, in other disciplines as well. And I'm actually really happy about the fact, not only the fact that we won this, but I'm in pretty cool company. If you look at Class 5500, it's structured as a spec class. And in the past, winners have been people like Paul Dallenbach and also Patrick Dempsey. So to have my name in the record books of that is kind of just an average Joe. It's a pretty cool thing to have.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah. Got to go do that. So, hey,
you do, Ross. Hey, if you do it, let me know. I'll come do it with you. How about that?
Okay, let's do that. So let's switch it to the motorsport marketing partnership / sponsorship, whatever we want to call it. My career, I never had any money, and it was all about, finding the next sponsor to fund my racing. And I learned pretty quickly that it was all about what value I could provide somebody else. But the game has changed so much through the years. From, there was a time when somebody would pay to put a sticker on a car and go, wow, there's my name on the car. And I don't think that's the world anymore. So I'm curious to just, I guess, start by asking you, what are some of the big mistakes you see people make? And I think we can talk about this as, there's the pro level stuff, and then there's the club level amateur racer guy as well. So I'm curious to kind of just get your thoughts to start with. What are some of the big mistakes you see people make?
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head about value. And I think that's the most important thing as racers that we have to remember is, what is our value? What value can we provide? If you go back to the 70s and 80s, it was really driven by sponsorship was tobacco, it was beverage companies, it was alcohol. I mean, that's what it was. And it was looked at as an advertising investment because there were a ton of fans at the races. And at that point, racing really wasn't out of hand from a cost standpoint, and it became efficient. There's nothing as a marketer that pains me now is when I get a note from somebody to tell me that sponsoring the race team is a great advertising investment, because there's nothing further from the truth. Right now, with the advent of social media, I can specifically target an audience and get tenfold the return for a fraction of the investment of sponsoring a race car. So if you start off with the conversation of an advertising position, you've already lost the battle, and you're not going to get any further than that. I think the other challenge the industry has is everybody has this box of a gold, bronze, and silver, or a 3-tier type scenario where if you sponsor this much, you get this, and if you sponsor this much, you get that. And again, until you have a conversation with me and understand what my objectives are from a corporate standpoint, how can you tell me what I'm going to get out of it? Because I may want part of package A and part of package C, and the value to it, to me, is a fraction of what you want, or maybe it's greater because what those assets are worth maybe have a little bit more weight. So from that standpoint, if you're looking for sponsorship or looking for to partner with companies, you really have to start with the position of not how much money do I need to fund my racing program, but it's the position of, I can provide you value. How company XYZ can I help you grow your business? What can I do to help you grow your business? And that's the beginning point of a conversation. For some people, it might be hospitality. Some people just might want to see their brand on the side of a race car. When you get into the corporate level and we have to go to CMOs and we have to go to the board and go pitch why we're involved in a program, we better have some cold hard facts that if we spend X, we're going to get Y return, or we won't be around very long. And knock on wood, I've been around 20 years, so we must be doing something on the positive side. If you really think about sponsorship nowadays, and COVID was really the big equalizer, especially for the grassroots racer. a lot of the brand impressions of a lot of the building and with audiences at the pro level, that all came to a stop last March when COVID hit. Now you still have some media value to cars running, through the network television coverage and some of the live stream. But the big difference between pro and grassroots racing right now really isn't much but a bunch of zeros at the end of it because of the amount of infrastructure involved at the pro level versus the grassroots level. If you're trying to tell a story or you're trying to get involved and trying to influence a specific group of motorsports ambassadors, shall we say, grassroots has just as strong of appeal right now as what professional motorsports does. So, think about it from that perspective. And I think really to frame this, there's really three types of sponsorship. And I think if people can understand this, they'll really understand why companies do what they do and really how they all come together. The first thing is business development. You see a lot of what they call B2B, where you've got companies that go out and interact with other companies. The gentleman drivers have a great opportunity for this because they own companies. How can they leverage their company to grow their own personal business and in turn affect their racing program? So that's one option. We can talk a lot more detail about that because there's some neat scenarios there. The second thing is really the influencer standpoint, which is, you as a person, Ross, you as a person have an audience, you have influence, you have a core audience of motorsports followers from different platforms, whether that's Facebook or YouTube, or whether that's Instagram. You have an audience right now that will listen to what you have to say. So you have influence over them, right? So the influencer component of them, you essentially now are becoming the media outlet that cable television was 20 to 30 years ago. And in a lot of cases, it's a lot more direct because you can validate that product, which is the third piece, product validation. You can validate that because your influence is strong enough with your audience that, maybe you only have 4,000 or 5,000 followers, but if half of those followers are believing what you say versus someone with 100,000 followers that has, 1% of them that are actually interacting with it, you actually provide more value. So those are really the three pieces for sponsorship. Business development, how do you help grow companies' business? Being an influencer, how do you tell an authentic story that the brand can be behind that makes sense for its audience, for its consumers? And then the last piece of it is product validation. Now, you see a lot of product sponsors in the marketplace, but if you think that you're going to go to a major company and ask for product and expect them to be able to fund your racing, there's 1,000 other people doing the same thing. For them, it's really about validating it. It's going to be a smaller deal. Maybe it's a product swap out. But let's use the example of all three. If you can tie all three of those pieces together, now you've got a really impactful program.
And that word to me, it's the impact, right? Because you can have whatever, you could reach 10,000 people and not have any one of them really interested, or you could reach 100 people and have 100 people that are really interested. That's part of it, right? Yeah.
That's absolutely it. That's absolutely it.
So I'm curious. Well, actually, so two questions here. One is is it as valuable to sponsor a driver versus a team? And then secondly, how important is the social media part of the driver and the team?
So that's a very intriguing question. And my answer to that is going to be, depends on your strategy and what you're trying to achieve. Okay. Let's use some case points. If you are a driver who, I don't know, let's just use I have one through my mind, but you'll know who I'm talking about if I go down this road. Let's just say, Ross, you're Canadian, right? And there's a Canadian company originally from Canada. So if you have a company that was from Canada, it may be better to align with you because there's a pride of nationalism and you can speak to it more so than maybe me because I was born and raised here in the States. So from that side, from a driver standpoint, maybe there's more affinity to that driver than the team. If you're trying to expand your reach, now with the advent of multi-car teams, for me as a company, if I can be a primary on a car and have ride along on 2 or 3 other cars, there could be value to that. There's the economies of scale to that because there's more efficiencies from not only development, but there's more efficiencies from media value. But there's also more efficiencies, the fact that I now have 3 or 4 people telling my message rather than one person telling my message. So it really is all depends on the case specific and what you're trying to achieve out of it. If I'm trying to do a product development deal, the more cars that are running my product, the better off I'm going to be, because I've got that many. I've got 4 times the amount of data to be able to go off of to validate the performance. Second piece, I guess you asked me, was the social media piece. It's critical at this point. And that could be its own conversation within itself, but that's where building that influence of building that network comes in, and keeping that driver and the team positive, and just providing, you want them to share your message and share content and talk about what you do in as much of an organic and authentic way. And that's the challenge that we've had as an industry, is I think sponsors have diluted drivers and diluted the message so much to be on point to brand that we forgot the personalities. And when you can bring the personality back in and actually tell the story, then it's just that much better, and the audience will resonate with it.
So that's I guess that's a good and a bad thing for drivers. If a driver really truly builds a social media following, but you also have to be careful what you put out there, and you can be too politically correct and not have any personality, and you could be not politically correct enough and blow up your career, as some drivers have.
Exactly. Well, and it really comes back to almost the why. What's your why? Why are you doing this? What do you stand for? If you truly have a mission and a defined mission, your objective is to go find sponsors that align to that mission. And if you can have that, then you're authentically telling a story. I'll use a case in point here. Obviously, with Peak, we have a lot of sub brands that are in the heavy duty side. Who's our number one face? John Force. What did John Force do? He drove trucks when he was younger. Do you see a parallel and tie-in how somebody that has that background might resonate with a specific audience? I mean, that's just an example of it.
But John Force is a personality on steroids, right?
Well, he is, but it's just one example of how you can bring that personality to life and have it make sense, because he's telling a story that he's lived, not a contrived point that I'm giving him sound bites to go regurgitate to all of us.
Yeah. And one of the pieces of advice that I always gave young drivers was, you need to have a hook, something that separates you from everybody else. And, a lot of times I'll ask a driver, what's your hook? And they'll say, well, I'm fast. I win races. And it's like, sorry, dude, there's a lot of race drivers that are fast and can win races. You need to have something else. And, to kind of the example you used, I mean, me being Canadian, I could use that to some extent. But guess what? There are other Canadians who are fast and can win races. So I guess how important is that? And I think of John Force, I mean, part of his hook is just his personality, who he is, right?
That's exactly it.
And it's tough, if I'm the quiet, reserved driver over here, to come to you and say, you should sponsor me, not John Force.
Well, it is, but at the end of the day, too, if you have a compelling reason as to why, from a business standpoint, then we at least have a conversation whether or not it works or not. And that's, and not just taking the Peak side in this. I'm just talking in general for the industry. If to me, the best opportunity is if you have a business that somehow you can help to begin with. And I like to I'll call them the anchor partner, because essentially they anchor this whole thing together, right? So whether that's a family company, whether that is a good friend, you got a friend that does whatever, is in the construction business or what have you. They may not have to give you a dime, but if you can help them go secure new business and new clients through your racing program, that new business will fund your racing program. So, if I'm a young driver and I'm going to give advice to a young driver, that'd be the first thing I'd say is, if you don't have family money or don't have the funding to do it, who do you have in your circle that owns a business who you can have a conversation with and help them grow their business? Because those are the people who will be most loyal to you. And if you can genuinely show them you're trying, whether or not you're making an impact initially or not, they're liable to hang with you and help you go to the next level. And at some point, if you do this right, at some point, the building blocks are going to be there and it's going to start to take off and everybody wins in this. And now you've got security, as much as you can have security in this sport, as you know, you'll have fundings to be able to go to the next level, whatever that is that you decide to do.
So I'm curious, I'm going to give you a tough question here. And that is, take a look at motorsport across North America. Let's just focus on North America right now. And that's, between IndyCar and NASCAR and amateur club racing and everything in between. What percentage of the sponsorships that are out there, and I'm doing those in air quotes for everybody that is listening to this, is, I guess, either it started with, or there was with a connection with somebody in a company who likes racing? Like how much of it is driven by there's a CEO or a marketing director or somebody in the company that likes motorsport, and they're going to listen to you and they're going to sort of become the champion within the company. And I guess maybe the flip side of that is, can you even sell motorsport marketing partnership program if you don't have somebody like that?
So I don't have an exact figure, but if I had a gut, I'd say it's 90 to 95% of them, because you hit the nail on the head, Ross. I can present, Ross, you the best Speed Secrets program in the world and how it's going to help you grow Speed Secrets. And if you have zero interest in motorsports or in sponsorship, I'm wasting my breath. So that's the first thing, is you've got to have a champion internally who sees the value of it, who understands the opportunity, and who will help push the program through. The other piece of that is you have to be able to show why it's important and show how it's going to help grow the business and how it's going to move the needle forward. Is a corporate, in most cases in a corporate situation, everybody's looking out for, how do I advance my career and what do I do? Unless you have somebody that's absolutely passionate about the sport. You could be my white knight, Ross. If you brought me a program that's going to show me how I can't lose and double my business, this may help me advance in my career. So I'm going to team up with you and try and push this to get somebody internally to agree to it and sign off on it and move forward with it. But if you don't have that person internally, you can cold call all day long and you're going to run into brick walls. And I'm guilty of it too. You know how many proposals I get and throw away because whatever it starts off, because I just don't have time to go through it. So the best thing I can say to any racer is you have to have a compelling story, a compelling argument as to how you're going to help me grow the business. And at least we may have a conversation at that point.
And again, it doesn't matter whether we're talking at the NASCAR, IndyCar level, or SCCA, NASA club racing, or anything else, right? It's the same kind of thing, just the number of the zeros.
It's the number of the zeros and return on the investment. I mean, it's a ratio. If I spend $1,000 and I get 10,000 back, it's a better ratio than it is if I spend $1 million and get 2 million back. So, you just got to look at it from that standpoint.
So can I flip your comment around about the, getting the champion and all that kind of stuff, but how it can advance your career? I believe, and I could be totally wrong, but I believe that there are times in my career when I was trying to sell a motorsport program where the reason I got a no was because it was a little too risky. Like somebody was kind of like, I think that kind of makes sense, but the safe way of doing it is we buy traditional ads over here. And maybe 100%. That's changed a little bit.
No, I mean, it's absolutely the same scenario, and it's the same scenario even more so now with digital, because digital's become so efficient. I mean, look at the reach we have in social media for really no investment, personally, professionally, and corporately. So that does become a challenge. Again, at the end of the day, it's about growing a business and being confident that what you're going to do is going to grow that business. The safe method is to go buy advertising, because that you can show an equation, A plus B equals C. I buy X amount for this, I get this many impressions, I can show it. The challenge is showing is whether or not, it's moving the needle or not, whether or not it's driving sales. And that goes for anything. That's where even, a lot of proposals I see now are about building brands. Again, how do I show how much the brand grew because of this? Maybe there's some things I can do to show that, but it's not as hard a quantifiable number as some other things, where this is why if you start with the sales conversation, it's hard. Don't get me wrong. It's the hardest way to go about this. You can show, hey, look, Ross, you and I teamed up and I got you X amount of dollars of new business. That is something that goes, at the end of the day, we all know what business run on, right? Businesses they don't run on revenue. They don't run on units. They run on margin. They run on money coming in, right? There's got to be more money in than it's got to be going out. If you help me make that number better, you're a hero. And that's what we've got to start changing the narrative in motorsports to be. And again, it's smaller scale, but those smaller scales escalate. I'll give you a quick story. Good friend of mine, Bobby Bennett, owns Competition Plus, and he wrote a great article a couple years back about Kenny Bernstein. And you think about Kenny Bernstein and his Budweiser sponsorship for all these years, and everybody thinks about the multi-million dollar sponsorships. Kenny's original sponsorship was only a couple $1,000. That's all it was when he first started. You know why Kenny was so successful? Because Kenny looked at it not as an advertising opportunity, but as a business opportunity. Kenny went and got to know every single one of the Anheuser-Busch distributors around the country and made sure that he had relationships with all of them. See, Kenny owned a restaurant chain beforehand, so he understood the whole bar and restaurant scene and how this all plays into effect and how to make that business grow. So he worked hand in hand with the distribution network to grow the business. And as he grew their business, Anheuser-Busch wrote him bigger checks. It's pretty simple at the end of the day. When they wanted to get rid of him several times, the distributors all stepped in and said, you are not getting rid of this program because it's so successful. And we forget about that model, but that's how that's the conversation we need to keep having about motorsports. We need to keep thinking about.
Well, I think it brings back a fond memory when you talk about that in that when I was doing IndyCar stuff, I got a sponsor, AGFA Film, a photography film. And the original deal was literally on an IndyCar, it was literally a few $1,000s, and it turned into many, many, many times that. Never as much as it took to compete at the Penske level or anything like that. But I think that's a really good lesson. I think is sometimes you got to start small and then start to build from there. Does that make sense? And I guess, how often have you had that experience yourself?
Just about every partnership deal that I've ever been involved in over the past 20 years has started at a level and has grown or gone away. I mean, that's reality.
So I guess the temptation to walk in and say, here's a proposal and it's for $1 million. Maybe you should hold back and figure out how to sell it at a much lower level first before you try to sell at that level.
Yeah, exactly. Unless you can, I mean, again, everything in business is about providing a solution, right? So if you can provide a solution for that monetary investment that's valid, then there's a conversation. But if you're looking at it from the perspective, and we're all guilty as racers of this perspective of saying, I need a budget of X amount of dollars, 100,000, $1 million, $500,000, whatever that number is. I'm going to go into somebody and I'm going to pitch them why they should spend $500,000. And they look at you and unless you can hard and fast show them how they're going to grow that business, they're not going to go for it. You're better off to say, okay, I got a little bit of seed money here from myself I'm going to put in. I've got a couple of partners here who aren't putting financial commitment in, but they know some people who they think they can leverage and maybe get us some funding that way. And that's then you got a starting point. And when you have a few of those together, I think, Russ, you're familiar with the term, the sponsor summit. You've probably been to some of those throughout the years.
Yep.
Really what happens with these race teams is we get everybody together. We get all the sponsors together, all the different team partners together, and we all have conversations that go, great, you're here, we're here. How do we work together and help it work? And sometimes to get started, you need to have 2 or 3 of those. People don't need to know the economics, but you need 2 or 3 of those to show the credibility of who you are and what you do. And that helps build that network. And the bigger you make that network, the more funding that goes back into the organization, goes back to you personally as a driver to take the next step in your career. And again, if you can build them to where they're parallels and they can benefit one another, everybody wins.
So a word that you've used multiple times is conversation. And I think, I've been guilty of that, of walking in and sitting there and go, here's my pitch. And one of the things that I learned along the way, and you can tell me whether you think this works, is one of the things that I learned along the way was if I walked in and I said, after some conversation to get it started, but it was almost like, I have this product. Can you see how that would work for your business? And if I could get that person talking about how it could work for their business, and then eventually they end up selling themselves. So in me asking questions, I think a conversation, we need to think about a conversation as less about us talking and more about us asking questions. Does that seem like a good approach?
Absolutely. 100% on. And that's exactly it. There is that scenario of, I don't have to sell you if you've told me everything that you need to do to sell me, right? I've outlined it for you. bring me back this and make it efficient and make it so it's positive, so I can go in and explain to others why this is a good deal for everybody. And at that point, it becomes a no-brainer. Yeah. But the challenge is getting the conversation and then continuing the conversation. That's where everybody runs into the wall. And that's where you've got to have the right champion internally who wants to have the conversation, who believes in what you do, and is willing to help you craft that together. And there are companies who will, there are companies who won't. There are several companies that don't even know that they could be involved in the motorsport space. And it's just a matter of the right person presenting it the right way, presenting a compelling argument, and understanding how they could benefit from it. And the rest is history.
So again, kind of what I'm hearing is you have to do your homework. Like you have to take the time to figure out how you can provide value to somebody. You have to figure out how to get to the right people. They blanket, I'm going to create this one proposal and I'm going to email it or mail it out to 100 companies. The shotgun approach, it probably isn't going to work. But taking the time to figure out how I can provide the value and getting creative about that, that's kind of what I'm hearing too.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it comes down to the creativity. It's about meeting the objectives. And, you can send again, it goes back to the gold, bronze, and silver, right? It's the 3-tier deal. You can send that to 1,000 people and nobody's going to look at it because there's too many other things going on and it doesn't resonate with them. But if you ever come up, I can tell you at the PRI show, I was going back 15 years ago, and I'll leave the driver's name out, but he came up to me and he said to me, I'm so-and-so, and I'm here to help you grow your business. I said, okay, you got 3 minutes. Sell me your pitch. And nothing came about of it, but we did have a couple conversations afterwards. And I encouraged him to keep going. Like, look, I can't do anything with this right now, but you're pitching us the right way. So keep doing what you're doing. And he wound up in a NASCAR level ride. So again, it's the approach. That's what it comes down to. And you ask enough people, and you never know. You ask 10 people of this, 1 or 2 of them may give you the time of day and may have this conversation. And all it takes 1 of them to get the wheels turning.
So how does this relate, I guess, specifically to, and maybe you can give an example, to a club racer, local races locally, kind of regional runs, maybe 1 or 2 tracks. There is no media coverage, that kind of stuff. Like, how does somebody like that turn what you've talked about into some support?
Well, and that's an interesting question. And there's a couple of ways that I would suggest. So if you're looking at a regional basis, let's start with again, people that that have companies, and look at it from a regional standpoint. How can you help them on a regional basis? Is it inviting a few people out to the racetrack to get excited about what you do? Is it, connecting them with other businesses in your local area? I mean, if you live in a town, there's hundreds of businesses there. Can you help connect a couple of people together? The good thing with club racing is you're not looking for as big of an investment as what you'd be looking at the pro level. And the other side of that is, look at a club racing standpoint, you're going to go club racing with or without the financial investment. Right. I mean, most people are going to do this whether or not they've got sponsorship or not. So if you can start to offset some of that cost and get a couple people involved, that's the beginning of the snowball. And again, it's the network at that point. Even if you think about it, even from the contingency standpoint, who are contingency sponsors, and is there somebody locally that that maybe you can introduce to somebody that does a contingency sponsor and helps them out? It may not be a big deal, but a few little deals start to add up over time.
Yeah, and I think many drivers think about the product side of things rather than asking for cash, asking for product. But I think there's a lot of drivers who don't. They just think, I got a budget of $3,000 for the year or $30,000 for the year or whatever it is, and they want the cash, and don't spend enough time thinking about, well, what do I spend that cash on? How can I get some of that back? I mean, a local racer who goes to Mid-Ohio 6 times a year, maybe they do a deal with the local hotel that says, give me some free hotel rooms, that kind of thing, right?
Absolutely.
As long as they provide value. Yeah.
As long as they provide value. Exactly. I mean, the best way to do it is start with your expenses. So what are your expenses when you go race? You've got usually some type of travel and logistics, which net out to be fuel, hotels, maybe entry fees that play into effect. You've obviously got tires and consumables like tires and brakes, fuel for the race car. Think about this. This is your cost to go do this. If you can knock any one of those out, you're ahead of the game. You're making progress. If you play the game right, you can get brake contingency, you can get tire contingency. Maybe you work with a local gas station. They give you gift cards for fuel that you can fuel your tow vehicle up and the race car up with. And now that's an expense that's come off the books. And that's how you start. And that's what it's about. And then as you learn how to do those deals, then it's not any more difficult to ask for 10 million as it is to ask for 10,000. It's just providing the value and understanding the skill set.
Every now and then you see somebody you drive past a gas station and there's a race car parked in the corner of the parking lot, and people are driving in and going, look at that race car. And it drives, oh, while I'm here, I'll get some gas. So, little simple thing like that could make a difference. It, maybe not a big deal, but it's worth something. Yeah,
absolutely.
Hey, Brian, you're obviously very passionate about the probably as much about the marketing side of things as you are about the driving part of it. At least that's what it seems like to me. Why do you do this? I'm curious. Why?
Well, it's funny you say that. A couple of reasons. Well, one, for me, I'm fortunate enough to get to go to the racetrack for what I do for a living. So that's it. I want to be at a racetrack anyway, so I get to do it for a living. But the other thing is I've been fortunate enough that for 30 years, or more than 30 years now, I've been able to go to races, and I've got a passion for the sport. And if in any way, shape, or form, what I've learned can help other people do this right and make this sport better, and maybe prevent other people from making the mistakes that others in front of them have, we can change the perception of sponsorship. We can change the perception of motorsports and keep it in a positive realm. And if I can in any small way help people do that, then it's well worth the time and the energy to do it.
That's cool. I hope in one way that after this podcast, you don't end up getting an extra 500 proposals sitting on your desk.
Yeah, I have not either, but that's, I guess that's part of what this is about, right?
Yeah. Hey, but how do people learn more about what you do? And I guess both personally and maybe professionally, I guess.
Yeah, if you want to know a little bit more about me, probably the easiest way is I've got two websites. My own personal website, brianbohlander.com. It's kind of my personal portfolio. It tells you a little bit about my marketing background, some information about what we do from sponsorship standpoint, from guidance there, and then also about my racing background. And then from my own personal racing standpoint, brianbohlanderracing.com.
Okay. So one final question.
Yeah.
What is your speed secret? What is your one piece of advice for listeners today? And it could be about driving. It could be about the marketing side of things, or maybe something that merges the two. What's your one piece of advice, your one speed secret for people?
There's a lot of different things I could do. I could go all the way down to the point of reading Russ Bentley books, which I've said on other podcasts, but I won't do that today for you. No, I think really comes down to people ask me all the time how to get involved in the automotive aftermarket. And I always say, reach out and just ask those of us who are in it, because we want to help you do it. And I think that filters down to anything from the corporate side to for the racing side. We're passionate about automobiles. We're passionate about motorsports and about racing. I haven't yet met a person that if you show some enthusiasm about this, who isn't willing to give you all the time that they can possibly spare to share it with you and get you involved. So if there's one thing to take away, it's just, if you really want to be involved in this sport, just look for the people that are in the areas that you want to be involved in and reach out, because we're here to help.
Well, my two takeaways from that is, the obvious one, but the other thing is, and you've touched on this a number of times while we've talked, is the networking part of it, building that network of people that who can help open doors or connect you to people, that kind of thing. But the other thing that you just talked about, the enthusiasm, and I know some drivers who I believe they got financial support through their career by infecting others with their enthusiasm and passion. Like I know young drivers who they talk to somebody and they leave, and the person goes, I don't care about helping that guy. and somebody else comes up and talks to that person, and they leave and they go, wow, I want to help that person. So I think that's a really good point of maybe the good point to kind of end on is when you can demonstrate your enthusiasm and passion, people can't help but get caught up in that. And hopefully that's a value.
As my website says on the homepage. Oh, it is. As I say, kind of my mantra is passion is contagious, and that's absolutely it.
Okay, cool. Well, Brian, thanks so much for being on the show and for sharing. It's cool when people listening to the podcast can take stuff, and I've got notes all over a piece of paper of things like, if I'm looking for a sponsor next week, this is what I'm going to do. So I hope others have gotten that same thing as well. So thank you so much for sharing and sharing your enthusiasm and passion, but also some tactical, strategic things as well.
Well, Ross, I really appreciate the opportunity, and thank you again. It's great getting caught up. It's been a while since we've seen each other, so I look forward to being able to get together here in person sometime down the road here, sooner rather than later.
Hopefully at a racetrack, and maybe even someday without wearing a mask.
Exactly. Yeah.
Hey, good luck this year. Have some fun, and as always, keep learning and sharing what you're doing. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks, Ross. Thanks again for the opportunity.
If you're in charge of your car club's HPDE program, listen up. Ross has a free webinar for you. In it, he shares his insights into what will help you grow attendance and loyalty among participants. The webinar is titled How to Grow Your High-Performance Driver Education Events. Ross will give you tactical and strategic approaches to making your events more profitable. He tells you how to provide a better learning environment and to create more fun for your participants. And you heard it right, it's free. Ross is making this webinar available at no cost as a way to help you and your organization. He wants to see more people get involved in this sport, and he wants to help those already involved continue to enjoy it. You can download this free 1-hour, 15-minute video by going to speedsecrets.com/webinars.